Well, welcome everyone to our first ADHD workshop for this year, the new school year. Let me pull up some slides just to kind of work through and give you something to look at for a minute. But I am going to start with just introducing your two hosts for the evening. Let's see if I can get that going there. And I'm going to switch it up a little bit, on our end, by introducing my partner in crime in this collaboration that we've been doing, because it's a year now, Caroline, that we've been working together. And so this is Caroline Fritz. You will see her. She's waving right now, and she's going to help facilitate and co-facilitate with me and moderate the question and answer session later. But she is a co-founder of the Children's Advocacy of South Carolina. And that's a collaborative forum for educators and families for the purpose of really identifying tools that would help learners channel their energy and passion so that they can be successful in school and in life. And towards that end, she's come together with me, and I'm Kate Franch, coordinator for outreach and grants at Camperdown Academy. And we have been holding a series of workshops, again, starting last fall in 2019, around the very broad topic of ADHD. So we're a year into it, about halfway through, in the midst of a pandemic. When it took hold, really, we, along with everyone else, shifted from an in-person venue to the online world. And that's where we are now and why we are here together. Some of the topics that we've covered in this past year have included an overview of what ADHD is and looking at ADHD in the classroom, how you manage that, ADHD in the home, how you can manage that as well, optimizing brain health, the dynamics of motivation, building healthy relationships, strategies and tips for not just surviving but thriving while school was out over the summer, hopefully to minimize that brain drain. Each time we have a workshop, we try to get it to build on what we've done before. And that really kind of leads us to tonight, where we're going to look at the fact that school is back in session in a way we weren't hoping that it wouldn't have to be. For some of us, it is in person, like here at Camperdown. For others, it's in some sort of hybrid model. And for others, it's just totally virtual still. But regardless, as parents, we're having to figure out, how do we effectively nurture and manage our family under these circumstances? And how do we function adequately in a quasi-educator role, right? With the hope that our children sort of experience at least decent academic success as we all get through this. So that's going to be our topic tonight. It's a part of a 3-part mini-series, because when Dr. Woods got into it, she realized there were sort of 3 distinct sections to what she's going to talk about. So we're going to do that over the course of 3 weeks, just for an hour. So hopefully that's manageable for all of you. Before I actually get into some introductions and get us going, I just want to review some rules of the road for us tonight. First, to remind you that the workshop is being recorded, so it will be available afterwards. You can always find our recordings. We have links for them at camperdown.org in our programs, our workshop and trainings webpage, but also all of our partners, the panelists, as well as Children's Advocacy, will get the recording, and they're going to have it on their Facebook page or web pages or through their social media platforms. So, and I'm also going to email it to all of y'all for whom I have an email address afterwards. So you'll have it and you can review this information afterwards. We are going to ask that you mute yourself and remain muted through the presentation, unless later on during the Q&A you want to ask a question directly. But this is what the mute looks like, please. In case you're new to all of this, you should at maybe the bottom or the top, kind of depends on how your screen's set up, see a microphone icon. It should have a red bar through it if you're muted. So please do that. The video is, some of you are already doing that, not turning on your camera, and that's really entirely up to you. We're also going to ask you, though, to make use of that chat feature. So if you're like I am when I'm listening to information, I say, oh, this question pops in my head, just get it down on paper right away. And you can do that by using the chat feature, which, again, in that ribbon, you'll see a little like conversation bubble chat. Click on that and a sidebar will open up, and there'll be a little text box that you can type in. And so get that question, that comment already on the page. We're all monitoring it, and it'll be wrapped into the conversation after the main presentation. And as I said, we are going to have a question and answer session that follows Dr. Woods' keynote presentation. So it's my pleasure now to kind of introduce our panel. And we have had a panel kind of all along, but since we moved into our online version, we've had a consistent panel of 4 members, 3 of whom are with us tonight. And our keynote speaker is Dr. Sheila Woods. You'll be able to see these bios if you want to see them in full on the Camperdown website if you want. But just very briefly, quickly, Dr. Woods, such a pleasure to have us with us. She is a board-certified pediatrician who's been practicing medicine for over 39 years. And along the way, she founded a specialty practice, Greenville ADHD Specialists, here in Greenville. And Greenville ADHD Specialists provides evidence-based diagnosis and treatment for children, teens, and young adults with ADHD and related conditions. Dr. Woods feels that it is the highest privilege for families to allow her to evaluate their most precious family members to help alleviate the struggles they are experiencing. And I can tell you, in our time with her, we know that to be absolutely true. And that's why it's just wonderful to hear her experience and knowledge shared with all of us. Also with us tonight is Wakesha Fogle, who is a devoted educator of almost 2 decades and co-founder of Wake Academy and Consulting, also here in Greenville. Wakesha's goal is to help both students and educators achieve excellence. And they do this as they circumvent challenges and maximize opportunities so that they can assure themselves that their experience is an extraordinary education. Also with us is Jennifer Massey, who is a licensed social worker, and Jennifer co-founded Still Wind Ministries, a Greenville nonprofit focused on making private mental health therapy accessible to the public. In 2011, she developed the Challenging Horizons program, which is an evidence-based model for students with ADHD. Jennifer's passionate about serving and providing services for learning because it's the first career children experience, and it has significant impact on their second career. So we will get to hear again the benefit of all of these women. We might come back to her later after our keynote presentation. So at this point, I'm going to pull up Dr. Woods' presentation and get that going as well. Did I share? Did you see the screen before? Okay. See if I can get it going.
Sheila Woods, I'm a pediatrician and have been for 41 years now. And for the last 8 years, I've been practicing only seeing children.
It's really difficult to hear, Kate.
Okay, thank you.
To talk about school is in now, and what do we do? Because I think we all feel shocked, surprised about some of the new requirements, and we feel like we aren't quite sure what to do next. So the first part is what you can do to optimize learning in your home environment, or if your child is in school, to help your child. Part 2 will be if your child is having problems with learning, could it be ADHD? And part 3 will be if your child is having problems with learning, could it be learning disorders? So the things you can do to optimize learning, and I've used this for a long time, I call it the REPS, REPS, routines, eating and exercise, play, and sleep. These are things that you as a parent can actually control. So first, is this your home learning environment? An organized, structured space with the needed supplies? Or does chaos reign? And frankly, most of us are in the chaos category some of the time. My mantra is, when in doubt as a parent, choose the kids. There will be plenty of time later to choose work. So first, let's talk about the R, optimizing routines. Children do much better if they have regular, consistent routines and the environment and their time schedule is structured. It's important to involve your children in making schedules, genuinely listen to their ideas. Tweens and teens are actually capable of planning and creating goals, so they can be helpful. Focus on big picture goals and forget the small stuff. Zero structure builds zero motivation. So structure is super important. Well, how do you get to those optimized routines? First, be organized. Have family meetings to make a master schedule. Post the schedule where everyone can access it. Allow choices when setting up your schedules. Giving kids choices helps them learn how to make decisions. But it is important to limit the number of choices. And in my opinion, 2 choices are enough. So would you rather work on science or math first? Set expectations for schoolwork. So the student, the parent, and the teachers should work together on what those expectations are. They should be clear, consistent rules. Perfection is not the goal. Learning is the goal. Decide which rules are negotiable and which rules are not, and set clear boundaries, particularly if you are working from home and your child is doing school from home. Set a boundary as to when you can be interrupted or when your child can use technology for fun. Set up structure for study and work. Have a regular space dedicated to school, work, and your work. A space that's well lit, quiet, and with as few distractions as possible. Keep adequate supplies close by. Then also set expectations for personal appearance. I think this is important for the mindset of the student and the parent to dress appropriately for school or work and use good posture. Set the routine, consistent time schedule. So regular daily times for waking up, having meals, working and studying, exercising, healthy snacking, playing, doing chores, enjoying family, and going to bed. Consider the use of timers in your routines. This is just a chart example of the routines that might be possible. It's important to wake up around the same time every day, even on the weekend, to have breakfast around the same time, 20 to 30 minute work study sessions for grade school and middle school kids is about a good time frame for those students. And then a 10-minute active break, and then a return to the 20 to 30 minute work study. High school students may be able to have 50 to 60 minute work study periods of time. Consider in the younger kids using short videos for those active breaks that have music and dancing to get them up and moving, which gives their brain a break. Let's talk a minute about exercise. Exercise is so important, and the goal for everyone age 6 or over is to break a sweat every day and to exercise for 60 plus minutes per day. Most of us rarely meet this goal. But exercise, there's good scientific evidence that exercising improves certain brain chemistry and brain chemicals that help students focus. Also improves your sleep, reduces stress, boosts self-esteem, improves an overall sense of well-being. A few years back, people used to talk about endorphins being improved, and there is evidence this occurs. It also strengthens your cardiovascular system, your bones, your muscles, and prevents obesity and diabetes. So how are we doing in South Carolina with exercise? The CDC has a youth risk behavior survey of students every 2 years. And the 2019 survey will be coming out in the next month. And as pediatricians, we're always interested to see the results. But this shows from 2017 that 24.3% of high school students in South Carolina were not physically active at least 60 minutes on at least one day prior to the survey, whereas 15.4% of the U.S. in general were not active. And 78.3% of those same high school students in South Carolina were not physically active on 7 or more days prior to the survey, versus 73.9% of the students in general in the United States. Eating, optimizing eating also matters because everything you eat matters over your lifetime. So one way to think about eating for kids is the choosemyplate.gov, where half of your plate consists of fruits and vegetables. The other half is grains and protein, and the liquid is dairy. It is important to vary your veggies and vary your protein sources. And when I say fruit, I mean whole fruit, not fruit juice. Another way to think about eating is the 5210 healthy eating plan. You may have heard this. Eat 5 times a day your fruits and vegetables. Cut your screen time to 2 hours or less. Get at least 1 hour of vigorous activity every day. And 0 is no sugar-sweetened soda, sports, or fruit drinks. Instead, drink water or dairy like fat-free skim or 1% milk in those kids who are over the age of 2. Under the age of 2, they need whole milk because those fats are important for their brain development. Protein you're giving your child, because protein in combination with carbohydrates and fats, a good balance is what helps children grow and be able to focus. So how did we do again on the Youth Risk Behavior Survey in South Carolina? 10.4% of high school students did not eat fruit. 12.1% did not eat vegetables. 34.8% did not drink milk. And almost 10% drank soda 3 or more times per day prior to the survey. And in all these numbers, South Carolina students were much worse than the overall United States numbers. The part of REPS, the P, is play. Having fun while you're playing is the goal. But you may not realize that play is seriously important in childhood. It promotes brain growth and brain development. There are actual cellular changes that occur in the brain when your child is playing. Those changes improve their skill levels improve their ability to learn. Play also teaches social behaviors such as listening to directions, paying attention to a coach, solving disputes with words, not actions. And play is just as important to brain development as academic learning. In addition, play improves stress. The mutual joy, communication, and what I call attunement, which is that harmonious give and take interactions between children and parents or caregivers, all of that helps regulate the body's stress response. Let's speak a minute about online play. So for parents, I think it's important to use social media for good. You can tap into online tutors. I've referenced some websites on this particular slide. You can use video chats to prevent isolation. You can choose quality content. Common Sense Media is a wonderful website that has apps and video games that are good for learning, but also nonviolence. It's important, I think, to use the media together so that you are monitoring and discussing what your child is seeing. I realize that does not happen and cannot happen all the time, but at least once a day, check in and see what your child is seeing on their media source, be it a phone, an iPad, a computer. Also, limits are important. Media use should not interfere with sleep, exercise, eating, reading, or family connection. The American Academy of Pediatrics has a personalized media use plan online that you can fill out. It stimulates discussion in the family about how to limit media use, but not just limit, how to use media wisely. The S part of REPS is sleep, and sleep is important. And in fact, I consider it another vital sign. That's the first thing I ask about usually in my patients. So what is the recommended amount of sleep? Grade schoolers, 6 to 12, 9 to 12 hours. Teenagers, 13 to 18, 8 to 10 hours. So remember that when puberty begins, the teenagers' sleep-wake cycles shift about 2 hours. So that instead of being really awake at 7 a.m., they're not really awake until 9 a.m. They don't want to go to bed at 9 p.m. They want to stay up till 11 p.m. And that is a normal developmental shift of their sleep-wake cycles. But it's still important to try to get that 8 to 10 hours of sleep in for those teens. Sleep problems do happen in about 30% of children, and in kids who have ADHD, they happen in 50%. Daytime sleepiness leads to impairment in self-regulation, which leads to worsening of behaviors, impairment in concentration, decreased attention span, and decreased ability to convert their short-term memory into long-term memory. So if your child is sleep deprived, these are the things that happen. It is important to keep a regular daily routine of wake up and go to sleep. It helps to be active during the day. It's important to stop screen use at least 1 hour before bedtime. Do something relaxing during that 1 hour, like reading. It's okay to watch TV as long as it's relaxing TV during that 1 hour. And create a sleep supportive bedroom. Cool, relaxing, quiet, no electronics, no TV, and no distractions. Some kids use their bed as their playroom once parents go to sleep. If you realize this, it's important to remove the toys or whatever it is they're playing with so they're not tempted if they wake up during the night. So we know that adequate sleep really promotes a healthier immune system, better school performance, better behavior, better memory, better mental health. And we know that long-term sleep deprivation causes hypertension, obesity, headaches, depression. So it is important to really optimize the sleep schedule. This little girl, I don't think quite had her sleep optimized. If the schools are closed for too long, the parents are going to find a vaccine before the scientists. Stay tuned for part 2 when we will talk about ADHD.
Okay, so how are we doing on questions coming through? I don't have the chat box open.
So we haven't gotten any questions during the presentation. We did get some questions ahead of time. And before we jump into those, I would just like to thank Dr. Woods for putting this presentation together for us. I like the simplicity of the message. I like the acronym. It helps it to be easy to remember. And parents and teachers and administrators that have joined us tonight, thank you for joining us. You know, one thing about ADHD is if your child has ADHD, well, you know what? It's hereditary. So chances are they got it from, you know, one of their parents, and that makes all of this a lot more challenging. I know in my own home, it's hard to be structured because I'm not very structured, and we have some challenges with that. So I'm going to ask some of these questions addressed to our whole panel, Dr. Woods, Wakesha, and Jennifer Massey, and I'm sure that our audience is going to be able to relate to some of these questions. The first one I could have asked myself, and that is, I'm a single parent. I have no option but to work during the day. How can I help my child who is severely struggling with virtual learning? So who wants to, I know the presentation really covered that in detail, but if you had, you know, 1 or 2 things for the parent that can't constantly check on the child throughout the day, what would those be?
I would suggest to the mother, I'm sorry, Wakesha, I'll let you talk just a minute, that the mother set a timer for herself so that she has a reminder to check on the child every hour, every 45 minutes, whatever works best for her. It's very difficult because not only is she wearing a work hat, she's wearing a mother hat, she's wearing a teacher hat. And it's just very difficult. I would give herself a pat on the back for being concerned about it and wanting to make things better.
I would definitely piggyback on that in saying, if possible, you know, get a tribe in. If there are 2 other family members, someone else that's available that can have an allocated time on a day, that they might be that check-in person that can have a little bit more of extended dialogue. You know, the parent, you can even, you know, send them a few things to ask, and just having that moral support throughout the day. I know I personally do that for a few students. For parents, I just spoke one today that they're not available because they're a teacher at all. And so I'm their checkpoint person at around noon that I'm checking in virtually. So if that is an option, you know, maybe seek some family that might be able to help as well, and maybe get on a Google Meet with them or something like that at different points in the day. It doesn't have to be the same person.
Love it. Love it. Thank you both. So in regards to this switch to using the computer, probably more than we want our children to be on the computer, how can we help a young child who has a short attention span stay tuned to having to stay checked in for?
I would say it's a muscle that's being built, and it's going to over time improve. And so really just setting a goal and really knowing if they're only able to, for a certain amount of time, just work towards that. But then also, just as Dr. Woods explained, and having that environment, do they possibly need an environment that's a little bit more isolated? I know I told a kiddo recently, you know, go sit on the floor in the corner, you know, and so they went and sat on the floor in the corner, and it was just, we were just there, and it kind of put them in their own little bubble a little bit and helped remove some of the distractions that were in the room. But it's just going to take time. Everybody's going through it right now. So just a lot of dialogue about that and understanding, and just really kind of monitoring as much as possible to see if that is increasing. It'll get better. It will get better, but it's going to take some time.
And I'm actually I'm gonna follow on Wakesha's response there and just add from my own perspective, with kids that were not used to being home learners, kids aren't getting the exercise that they were getting when they were going to school. You know, you're moving around a school building, you're moving around a classroom, and a lot of times you have a child walking down the hall to the living room and plugging in, and they're just not getting the exercise. And you know, sorry to bring this up, we all need to get more exercise, right? So, and we know it helps. It helps with focus. And so I really encourage families to find some, you know, make the time to do some fun family, that, you know, get the whole family together for a morning walk, something along those lines, just so that, you know, you can help extend your child's attention span. So just wanted to throw that out there. I know we all hear that we should be doing it, and it's just so hard to make the time to do it. But especially now with kids just really being tied to the home and not moving around too much, I think it's one of those things that we really need to try and encourage and lead by example. So,
and Caroline, can I just add to that? Jennifer has put in the chat box that Messiah Lutheran Church is offering space and supervision for students who are doing virtual learning alone. So that's a good local resource, because you know, it really is about, it takes a village to raise our children, and more so today in many ways, but more difficult given that we're supposed to stay socially distant. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Jennifer. Dr. Woods, were you going to add something?
Just that for younger kids, especially talking about the exercise breaks, I think 10 to 15 minutes of physically moving around, even if it's just doing jumping jacks, can really improve focus for the next 30 to 50 minutes of learning. They really do, and especially kids with ADHD, they really do have to move. Movement improves dopamine in the brain. The problem is that when you sit back down, the dopamine goes back down. And dopamine being low in certain areas of the brain is what contributes to a lot of the ADHD symptoms. So movement is really helpful.
Did you see, Dr. Woods, also the question in chat about how do you get your child to fall asleep if their meds keep them awake? She says, we have tried what you've suggested already, and our child does not do organized sports, I think.
Right. So, so what that says to me is that there may need to be adjustment in the medications. If a child's ADHD medication is optimal, sleep improves. Now, it doesn't improve the first few days you are starting a medication. It takes about 3 months for sleep to improve in kids. But if the dose is right and the medicine is right for that particular child, sleep really improves. And that 50% of kids who have sleeping problems drops significantly once they've been on their treatment for 3 months, usually is about how long it takes. So if you're in that 3-month period, I would really encourage you to hang in there, because that's tough. That's really, really tough. And then activity, the question about organized sports. I don't know that organized sports are the answer for everyone. I personally was never good at organized sports, but a lot of kids are good at riding a bike, shooting hoops, kicking a soccer ball, those kind of things that really, they're not organized, but they're physical activity that helps burn off that excess energy and then also helps them be more tired and ready to sleep.
Thank you, Dr. Woods. So I want to address something really quick. We are talking about interventions really that are helpful for all students, all learners, not just kids with ADHD. And I would love for you all that have questions specifically about ADHD, which we will address as we have time tonight, but we are having a session next Tuesday night, same time, the 22nd at 7 p.m. And Dr. Woods will be addressing ADHD a little bit more specifically at that point, especially in light of a lot of our children being at home and not having the testing resources and whatnot. So how to recognize it, and we'll get very specific in ADHD next Tuesday. And again, we'll try and address those tonight as well as we have the time to do so. So another question that came in the registration process was, and this is something that I struggle with my 8th grader and have since he was in probably 4th or 5th grade. How much help do I give my high school freshmen versus letting them experience bad grades? It's kind of like, at what point do you let them fail because it's not going to be that hard for them to get back up, versus how much structure and scaffolding do we as parents provide?
I would love to address this because as an educator, I've always been an advocate for more structure. And whereas I've taught in the elementary, middle, and the secondary level, and you'll see that in middle school, sometimes the kids will go a little wonky and some of them still need the structure. And if you think about when freshman academies came about, what did they do? If you've ever experienced that, they went back in some schools that have that set up and provided structures that you might see in a highly organized environment. So I just think that there's nothing wrong with adding it back in. It's going to be, you need to be responsive to your child. And I have 3 daughters, and they're all so different in their needs. And so just be responsive and don't feel bad if they need a little bit more than what another child might need, and you just gradually release it. But there's no magic number for that. It's going to be different. There's no magic way. It's just, you just ebb and flow based on them. And I always advocate for keeping the communication, the dialogue high as to why, and onboarding them and understanding that I'm not trying to micromanage you. I'm just trying to help you reach your goal. What is it you want? Is what you're doing working? Are you getting the results you want? And if you're not getting the results you want, come on, let's try some different things. And so that's what I suggest. So don't feel bad if you have to add it in, and just gradually release it, but do so in such a way that it doesn't feel like you're just nagging at them all the time, but more so of a shared process, a partnership in y'all reaching, a nice medium for that.
And I would add to that, I use a car analogy often in helping students get to the next destination that they're going to. And I think that I tell parents to help them get cranked up, so that when they start responding engaged in the material, help them as far as they can then take it and go on their own, which could be a longer time regardless of age, depending on the subject. But you want to get their motor moving, and once their motor's moving, then you can slide off to the side. But measure it by their engagement is how much I would help them regardless of age.
Great, thank you.
I would add to that kids, if you're talking about a child who has ADHD, their executive function skills, which means initiating a task, completing a task, prioritizing a task, planning a task, all of that tends to be delayed 2 to 3 years compared to their peers. So you may need to help that freshman much more than other mothers are helping their freshmen if ADHD is a part of the issue.
So we had a couple of questions in regards really to it, which sort of touches on the executive functioning, but one of them was around managing the self-regulation crash at the end of the day, particularly when it coincides with homework time. How can I help getting my child to focus on homework? It's hard to imagine after a day of virtual learning at home that there's then homework that's required, but unfortunately, oftentimes there is, especially for our high school students. So what would you recommend for, you know, that later in the day when homework time comes, how to help your child focus?
So I think that I used to call that the suicide hour because I was the one who was wanting to commit suicide. Everybody was tired, everybody was hungry, and it was homework time. So it's a matter of piecing out what is most important. If everybody's hungry, we got to feed them before they can focus on homework. If everybody is really tired, sometimes it helps to say, let's get up an extra 30 minutes early in the morning and we'll do that homework together. The other piece about the crash at the end of a day is that we all crash somewhat at the end of a day, whether we have ADHD, whether we're on ADHD medication, and sometimes the crash from medication coming out of the system is clear and hard. But whether we have that or not, we all, our natural system is that we go into lower drive. Our cortisol levels, which is what gives us energy, they're high in the morning, but you can see them naturally drop throughout the day so that by 5, 6, 7 p.m., we are getting more tired. It's a physiologic event, and we can't really change that. We don't want to change that. So the bottom line is to tailor your evening around those that slowdown period and figure out what can work in terms of homework. Frankly, I have said to parents in my practice, if you feel like your homework assignment for your child is excessive, it's okay to send a note to the teacher or contact the teacher and say, I'm sorry, we just couldn't finish it this evening. Could we have another day or another 3 days or whatever is needed to complete that particular work?
So kind of along those lines, I heard recently that ADHD is not really a focus problem, but it may be a motivation problem. And so I think some of the, you know, these questions around, you know, homework especially, we're losing motivation, right? I mean, I've stayed in tune all day with virtual learning, and now I've got to do homework and I just don't care anymore. And one of our sessions a few months ago, Jennifer Massey shared a concept called the motivation continuum. And I wonder, Jennifer, if you could spend a couple minutes talking about that continuum at a high level and sharing how we can help particularly our ADHD students with motivation. And you might be on mute.
Sorry, yeah,
There,
I'll
yeah.
just do that. It might help to show the diagram.
Yep, I'll pull that back up.
Okay.
Yeah.
So thinking about it using a car analogy and the child having, you know, a motor, right, which is not just the brain, but it's motivation, you know, it's everything that gets them going in a forward direction. And so if you think about the different levels of motivation, you can see that there are certain things that parents can do to advance the motivation. And that's why I use this motivation continuum that really is a combination of a lot of behavioral science theories. What you don't want to do is, if your child is at the very end of the motivation continuum, in that top row, they're saying, I don't do it. You don't want to be down at the other end and say, you know, well, you need to do it because it's what's good for you. Like, that's not going to get the car cranked up. So you've got to go one step ahead of where they are. And the parent statements are some suggestions down there on the lower row underneath the arrows, that if your child is in the I don't do it level of motivation, then you want to put a carrot out, and a carrot and a consequence, that I will agree to do what you want to do when you start doing what I want you to do. So I will agree to that when you will agree to this. And that doesn't solve the motivation problem, but it will get them to the next level of motivation of, I do it just to avoid consequences. And then you just want to get them to the next level. And so you can move them by these motivational cues that we use as therapists, where you can just offer the carrot here when I just do it to avoid consequences. And so you want to move them. You don't want them to stay on that one. And you want to move them forward by saying, you can go do that after you complete this. And so you have to do a lot of structured prompting for motivation on these first three levels, and only in the middle, where they do it out of obligation just to get it done, right? Most of what motivates us to get up and go to work is I do it because I have to. Then you don't have to work as hard at motivating them. But those first three, you have to work really hard at it until you get them to intrinsic motivation. And then you can even move them down there further by using those prompts, rewarding and then praise, and getting them to teach others. And so it's about identifying, like, if your car was broke down, you would really try to figure out what the issue that needed to be fixed just to get it running. You wouldn't try and get it ready for a car show. You would just try to get it running. And then when you got it running, then you would try to get it running a little better. And then you would try to fix it up a little more. And that's how we tackle this issue of lack of motivation.
I love a good visual. Thank you, Jennifer.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the other questions that came in through the registration process were pretty specific to ADHD. And so one of those is from someone who has not necessarily been diagnosed with ADHD. What are some of the common behaviors or red flags that indicate my child is struggling with focus that might not be easily identified or associated with ADD or ADHD? And you are muted, Dr. Woods.
ADHD generally has the components of inattention, impulsivity, and hyperactivity, but you don't need all three. And in fact, those people who just have the inattention, which is what the question is really asking, are the most difficult to identify. But they're the kids who can read a sentence. Let's say they're in the 3rd grade, they read a sentence, and you say, what did that sentence say? And they have no idea. They were just reading the words. They don't comprehend what the sentence said. Or the 6th grader reads a paragraph and you say, oh, well, what was that paragraph about? No idea. They read the words, yeah, and they might have read the words multiple times, but they have no clue what they really read because it didn't penetrate. And that's what you call, their brain was somewhere else. It was taking a break, a vacation from the task at hand. And it was taking a break because it wanted something more interesting to do. Caroline, you talked about it being a motivation, a deficiency of motivation. It's also a deficiency of interest, ADHD, because if you're not interested, really interested in what you're doing in that moment, you're not going to pay attention if you have ADHD. Whereas folks who are not, who don't have ADHD, even in the most boring thing, they can pay attention. And so that's somewhat of the difference. So if a parent thinks their child really is daydreaming a lot of the time because what's going on is not very interesting to them, that would be one of the clues for problems with focus.
Another thing about that is ADHD is easy to identify in impairment to working memory. So working memory is remembering something for the past, 15 minutes to an hour. And so people who have ADHD, their working memory is very impaired. That's where that focus inattention problem comes in. So there can be a lot of behavior problems, but not a working memory problem, right? So they can remember something from an hour ago, but they may have lack of motivation, or they may have a mood, problem, depressed or anxious, but they can remember something from an hour ago, or they can remember what they had for breakfast in the evening. ADHD students will not remember those kinds of details.
Right. Working memory also, just to add on to Jennifer's point, is that memory that allows you to complete math problems. And that's why so many kids with ADHD do have some difficulty with math. Once they get into multiplication and division, because math requires an order of operations. And you don't remember the order of operations sometimes when your working memory isn't doing what it's supposed to do. It isn't helping you out. The other part of working memory in school is that a teacher says, at the end of the day, she's saying this in the morning, but at the end of the day, I want you to pick up this folder because it contains your homework and take it home with you. So if your working memory isn't hanging in there, you're not going to remember that folder. You're not going to remember your lunchbox. You're not going to remember your backpack. You won't remember your coat, even if it's freezing outside. So that's the kind of thing that happens with the ADHD kids.
All right, thank you both. I want to throw this question out there while we still have time. So for folks that are looking for additional support, Dr. Woods, Kate, Wakesha, Jennifer, do you know of resources? And unfortunately, this is kind of specific to the Greenville area. I know we have some folks that have called in from outside of South Carolina. But as far as the upstate of South Carolina, do you know of resources, tutors, homework helpers? Are there resources in the upstate for parents that are looking for them to help support their home learners?
Kate, did you want to address that? Unmute.
Was unmuted for a long time. So we have tutors here at Camperdown. Most of them are going to be trained in the Orton-Gillingham method, which is designed to help students who have dyslexia as well. But I am happy to field any sort of request for that and see if the tutors match with what the need is. And so that's specifically what Camperdown has available. I'm wondering, I know you listed some tutors or a tutoring resource in your presentation, Dr. Woods.
Yes, I
Looks
do.
like that's pretty national.
Right.
Yeah.
We at least in my office, we keep lists of people who are willing to tutor in particular subjects. So there's a difference between an academic tutor who's just going to address math, for example, or reading, and an educational tutor who's going to address the dyslexia or
Right.
other learning problems. But that being said, there are a tremendous number of resources in the upstate. And I think it is, for parents, it's hard sometimes to know, who do I call? Do I want to go to a Sylvan Learning Center? Is that what's right for my child? And one way to help you figure that out is to talk with your doctor, but also to talk to other parents whose kids may have similar issues and find out, well, who helped your child and who did you call? Because that's the word of mouth is in my opinion, a better way to find out who might work best for your child.
I put some resources in the chat as well. I think maybe Wakesha dropped off, but she's an excellent resource for education, consulting, and tutoring. Some of my families are getting the structure kind of set up at home, and then they are finding college students, because college students are kind of stuck at home as well. And so they're finding college students to just come and be the overseers. And I feel like that is if you can establish the structure ahead of time and just have a college student or even a higher level high school kid that maybe gets out of school early or is doing the virtual school, it is a good possibility.
And the other way to find college students is to call up the colleges and talk to the education department. In other words, the people who are educating the college students to become educators. Often they'll keep lists of students who are willing to do private tutoring. So that's another way to find folks.
Mm-hmm. In general, I want to add too, and just in case this might reach somebody, be really weary about organizations or programs that can fix learning problems or ADHD. They are not evidence-based, and sometimes they can cost a lot of money, and they can help in some ways, but they cannot fix these issues.
Thank you, Jennifer, because there is no cure. There is no cure for ADHD. There's no cure for learning disorders, but there are certainly ways to help.
Yes, thank you for that. And since we are right at the top of the hour here, I would love Dr. Woods. First of all, let me thank you all again for your time tonight, Dr. Woods, Jennifer, Wakesha, Kate. Really appreciate you all devoting your time to this project. And Dr. Woods, if we could, if you had a top three tips for parents that are struggling with at-home learning right now, what would they be? Let me put you on the spot there.
Number one, pat yourself on the back because you are learning yourself how to become a teacher. And it's not easy. Take a chill pill. If your assignments for your child or the work assigned to your child is too much or above your head, talk to your teacher, talk to your school, try to get help from them. And number three, always, always please give your child the unconditional love that they need to be successful. And that means even when they don't do what you've asked them to do, or even when they've done things they shouldn't have done, you still love them. You don't like the action that they took or the decision that they made, but you still love them.
Thank you so very much for that. And again, for being with us. Look forward to having you all next week for part 2 of Dr. Woods' sharing the benefit of her experience and her knowledge. And let me just also pull this up. This is a reminder of the rest of the series where she is our keynote for this. So next week, from 7 to 8 again, is part 2, when your child has problems with learning, could it be ADHD? And then we're gonna skip 2 weeks, give you a little bit of time to sort of sort that out and watch things and monitor, and then come back and talk about, so if things are still happening or going down a path that you're a little concerned about, could this also be a learning disorder? And hopefully we'll give you some of the information that you'll find will be helpful and useful down the road. Thanks again for being here.
Thank you.
To see you next week.
Thank you.
Good night.
Have a great night, everybody.
Thanks.